Good morning. We're back on Senate Judiciary. This morning we're taking up the issue of raise the age, which we intend to have part of S58 at some point, but we wanted to keep raise the age separate to see if we can find some agreement with the administration before we put it anywhere. I think it's important that we continue, particularly in light of the positive elements of the Justice Lab report from Columbia University on the success of transferring 18-year-olds into the juvenile system. And raise the age was delayed twice. Once because of the pandemic and once because of post-pandemic problems by the legislature for a year. And so it's 2 years late, and this would delay it another 9 months from July 1st to 2024 when it's supposed to go into effect. So the first witness is Chris Winters, who may call on any of the staff. Tyler Allen is on Zoom and may wish to join us. Is welcome to comment. Oh, and Erica Radke is also the deputy commissioner, is also on Zoom. Mr. Winters, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name is Chris Winters. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families, and really appreciate another opportunity to talk this through. I was able to get a little sneak preview of this late yesterday, and I'm looking at it again now. Have had a chance to talk to the governor about this, and there's definitely an interest in what you're doing here. Would ask for just a little bit more time to go through the criteria and what the benchmarks could be as compared to what we proposed in our Raise the Age report. I think it's mostly covered here. There might just be a little bit of language to adjust.
I told you yesterday, I'm open to anything that we can agree on that would foster getting the Raise the Age actually completed. I honestly believe, some will disagree, but I think it's an important public safety move because the results from the 18-year-olds is positive. And the work that your staff has done with those 18-year-olds has been successful by and large. And so if kids don't commit more crimes, we have better public safety results.
Yeah, we absolutely agree and want to implement Raise the Age and do it in a way that's successful.
As I told you yesterday, these were just Eric's and my listening to the state employees on Friday, and me sneezing all day Saturday with Eric on the emails. He didn't know I was sneezing on the emails. And trying to come up with what these benchmarks might be. And I appreciate Eric's effort, by the way, on not only does Eric work during the week, but he also is available on weekends to the legislature, to me anyway.
And everyone else.
Well, I didn't think you would be available to House members.
Besides that.
But seriously, I couldn't do this without his help. And we went over it yesterday at noontime. I'm glad you had a chance to talk to the governor about it. And so I'm more than open to changing any of the benchmarks or what they are. I'm less open to changing the date.
Sure. Not a lot of huge changes to the benchmarks, I don't think. Just some adjustments of language. Tyler Allen can maybe speak to a little bit of what he saw and was recommending. And I do just want to be clear that the message I want to make sure to deliver from the governor and the administration is that we don't know where we'll be in terms of budget at this time next year. So we are hesitant to commit to, funding some of these benchmarks that are laid out here. Some of it's already built into the budget in different ways. We can get you more information on that. Some of it's slightly outside of DCF's control. Some of the substance use and mental health concerns that are raised in a few of these criteria. But we do are welcoming the opportunity to report to you on the progress that we're making over the next year as we work toward being able to implement Raise the Age. The only other slight pushback that I would have, I guess, is that the monthly reporting is not going to change that much from month to month, and would ask that it be slightly less than that, like maybe every other month or every 3 months for those several months of reporting that are included in this.
Well, maybe if it started now, I mean, not now, not today, but started whenever the effective date of it is, that we could start earlier and do it every other month. Eric, this was what was required of you and the homeless issue.
That's right.
Monthly reports to them. Mm-hmm. So that's what we used.
Yeah.
That isn't that. What would you like to do? Go over the 7 and then add or subtract or?
We could certainly speak to each one of these. If you want to go through the 7 that are here, I'd typically
then we'll
defer to Tyler on that.
Whatever you'd like.
Sure.
Or the deputy commissioner wants to weigh in, please, any of you, just feel free to be more informal in weighing in.
Great. Should I start?
Yeah. Please.
So, the first criterion here is establishing a secure residential facility. I think you all kind of know where we are and where we stand on that, and that we have the Middlesex temporary construction completed. We're engaged in conversations with a vendor. We're close to nailing down a contract. So we should be, within a month or two, able to have that contract signed and have that facility up and running. That's 4 secure beds in Middlesex, which is, the beginning of relieving some of the pressure on the high-end system of care. We have an RFP on the street for a permanent secure facility. We've received all of those bids. We had our first evaluation and went through the criteria on Friday. We're having another meeting this week with our BGS partners to make a decision on that. Again, that won't be public until we've inked a deal with the winning bidder. But that's also coming within the next month, I would say. And then design and construction is expected to take 2 years from the date that we sign the contract. So we're looking at sometime in the end of 2026, we think, for a permanent secure facility in either South Burlington or Virgins are the 2 properties that we're dealing with.
Do they state-owned properties?
The Virgin site is a state-owned property. The South Burlington is
where the week school was?
Yes.
That'd be like full circle.
Yeah. Definitely in a good. So that's the secure crisis stabilization piece of this. The permanent facility is also not just crisis stabilization, but also treatment. So it's another piece of the puzzle for some slightly longer term stays. Number 2 here, growing community-based treatment programs. I would turn to Erica or Tyler to comment on that, what's happening now and what we might report on, and then perhaps what's already in the works or in the budget.
Thank you all.
Tyler, please go ahead and start.
For the committee, my name is Tyler Allen. I'm the Adolescent Services Director with the Family Services Division. Thanks so much to the committee for having me be here. With regard to number 2, I think my assumption is that one is really talking about the expansion of our current system of care and all of the reports we've submitted over the past, I think, 3 years, 2.5 years or so. There's been a chart in there that shows what our pre-pandemic contracted capacity was, what the current license capacity was, and then what the actual operational capacity is. And so I think generally speaking, we're talking about the health of our system of care, not just the high-end system of care. And I would think that the benchmarks, the updates with regard to that would be our continued work to expand those existing programs to their full bed capacity potential. And so that work is ongoing. We have had incremental progress. There has been a little up and down, but generally speaking, there are some more beds available than I think it was 114 beds available at last count, which is up from 90 beds in February of last year. So we can keep reporting out on the incremental progress of expanding our community-based system of care.
It would also include, I hope, the complaint. I don't want to make it as a complaint, but a concern we heard on Friday from DCF employees about the wait time to get mental health treatment or any other treatment in the community for their clients. And the real concern there, the designated agencies weren't able to provide ready services. That, I also had that in mind, not just the residential, but the mental health. Senator Bowski.
Yeah, I wonder if those are sort of two different things, sort of lower level residential, because when I think about community-based treatment, I'm not thinking about beds, I'm thinking about access to treatment that for people who are living in the community still and not in any type of residential bed. So I agree with Senator Sears, and the lower level residential you're speaking of, or the long-term residential, perhaps is another benchmark we need. But I certainly look at the community-based treatment as community-based.
I agree with that. For the record, my name is Erica Radke, Deputy Commissioner for the Family Services Division. And in doing our listening sessions with the districts, that has come up in terms of there being just so little access to treatment, particularly for teens and maybe those experiencing drug addiction, alcohol addiction. And that's something that we need to try to work with those DAs to try to increase their ability to handle those youth in terms of making sure we do have community-based supports, because we are not only thinking about residential, but what's out in the community. And that's something that we're going to have to work with our sister departments to try to bolster that up.
I think the simplest way would be to have a new two that is those community-based treatment programs, and then another one that looks at the residential level of beds available in that you are already reporting on, that was cut basically in half during the pandemic, partly because programs couldn't hire people, and obviously if COVID struck in one facility, it was shut down more or less to new admissions, so you lost beds there. So I think we should separate those two out. Thank you.
I would like to just add to the committee that this is one of those areas that, as we say, we'd have to work closely with our sister departments. It's outside of our direct purview. Maybe in this report, it would be something about DCF's perspective on the access to mental health treatment or whatever, or we would have to ask Department of Mental Health to be a co-contributor in these updating reports.
And as we get further in here, we have other departments that are impacting your population and the acuity of the kids that you're dealing with. But number 3 is maximizing the use of balanced and restorative justice barge contracts. I don't know that it necessarily needs more money, but how do we maximize those programs to provide the balanced and restorative justice? Obviously, they would argue they need more money, and they've already argued with me that they do.
I thought we heard that they did in fact need more money.
Yeah, but leaving that out.
Tyler, I do wonder if you could speak to what we would see as the potential need when we go to raise the age in expansion of capacity for the barge contracts in order to handle the new caseload.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, so that's one of the areas that we identified in our Raise the Age report, our December 1st report, areas of need. I think we had at that point asked for almost $1 million. I think our most recent estimate is like a $1.1 million increase to the overall barge budget. And the rationale behind that is we believe that we could increase the barge workload by expanding it to include the not full supervision. DCF would still have to have some supervision, but those non-custodial cases that DCF currently supervises from a probation perspective could be ones that we move to our barge provider network. But that expansion of that service would require them hiring probably approximately 11 staff across the state to increase the case difference there. They currently serve, I think, roughly 700, I think 749 is the count of cases served last year. So that would expand that. And so we had asked for additional funds in the barge before, and that was one of the points of clarification of saying rather than maximizing the use of contracts, those programs are operating very much at capacity. They've been able to advocate a little bit of a budgetary increase, more to just right size their program because they had been level spent for so long, and that came from the programs directly. But here we would be looking to actually expand their services.
So you'd like the word other than maximize?
The suggestion I had put is expanding capacity of the balance and restorative justice programs.
Senator Bowski?
Yeah, I have a question that you may not know off the top of your head, but you seem to be well versed with the data. What was the barge? So you said they served about 749 cases. What was their budget last year?
Let me just look. I just looked that up. I can find that. I think it was $2.25 million was their, yep, $2.25 million. And that, I think that reflects the $250,000 increase that they were able to negotiate directly last year.
Next on the list is promoting opportunities for services for children with developmental disabilities.
This has come up with my conversations with staff at Depot, but also the state employees Friday brought this up as a real problem area for them. My understanding is that in the group home setting, many times these kids are very aggressive. And other times they are very vulnerable to other children in a group home. And it creates, they're not, the group homes don't have training and dealing with kids with developmental disabilities. And I think that's true of your staff as well. And I was looking here to get something that would force Dale to participate with you and work either, if you're gonna have them, you need help from them. What I'm fearful of is we're moving in the same direction as corrections, where corrections became the institution of last resort and gets all of these folks who they really shouldn't be dealing with, that are, and this has been going on for years and it's almost impossible to correct. And if this is just starting, it's something we have to nip. I think we have to get Dale to, and the courts. I'm sure that most of these kids have committed some form of crime, but if they were in adult court, it would be a decision that they weren't capable of defending themselves. So I think it's a critical area to stop, to deal with right now and have Dale take over. So I was that was the one thing that surprised me about the testimony on Friday was the level of kids that were asking our DCF staff to take care of youth.
This is definitely a critical piece of the puzzle, Senator, and something that's top of mind for us. Erica and Tyler can speak a little bit more to the work that we've been doing with Dale, to have them come forward a little more and play a more prominent role. But I think, realistically, the limitations on the DAs being able to meet the full needs that we have as a state are real, are a challenge. But maybe Tyler or Erica can speak to, some of the work that we are doing to try to meet this need. And it's totally appropriate for it to be called out on this list here and for us to be reporting on it.
Sure, I can start. I mean, it's definitely been a challenge for the workforce. And I agree, we do need to do some continuing partnership with our sister departments. We have been talking with them in terms of, while we're currently staffing a number of DSU, sometimes actually in our district offices, and it really is not a population that my team is trained to handle. So we have been asking for some kind of consulting services in order to assist us. But really, it's such a large problem. And these youth, what you said, Senator Sears, as far as DCF sort of becoming an area of last resort, does seem to be happening. And in order to, one, alleviate the pressure on the team, and two, really try to get these youth the services that we need, we're even actually considering hopefully partnering with sister agencies to stand up some type of program for DS youth in the meantime, just to try to get some kind of traction and some kind of assistance for these youth. In terms of specific numbers, though, how many youth we do have that we're serving that have DS concerns. I believe, Tyler, you've got some particular numbers on that.
Yeah, I asked my team, there's always more digging in that we need to do, but I did ask my team to identify who we're working with right now. Generally in the past 3 months, we've had 9 youths kind of within there's more, we call them DS eligible, developmentally services eligible youths. I think over the past couple of years, I think there's roughly 40 of those youth. But immediately the urgency, what you all heard testimony about last week, there's been 9 over the past 3 months where there's a great deal of urgency. And we've found placements for all of them at this point. There's likely a couple more coming our direction. I know that there's at least 5 or so that are currently under Department of Mental Health is working with those cases. They're not at the level right now where they're DCF cases, but as Senator Sears pointed out, what often happens is these cases, if there's delays to getting eligibility for developmental services or getting services in place for an individual who is living at home, things can get worse at home and challenges get bigger, and it's only sometimes a matter of time before there's an outburst or some sort of situation occurs that requires DCF to take custody of that case, or an individual is kind of stuck in a hospital setting for too long, and a parent might not be able to bring them home for lack of services in the home. And at that point, folks start looking at, is DCF an eligible agency to be able to take on that need? And so that's generally how it happens. So we kind of look at these populations as a group. I will say there is a lot of organized efforts to how we work together. Dale and DMH and DCF meets regularly. We talk about these cases. We talk about what's happening and how we can support each other in these. But often the limitation is that the local designated agency just doesn't have the workforce resources to apply services to a case timely enough. One of the solutions we're talking about is expanding their VCIN program, which is kind of an emergency crisis placement bed. We're trying to figure out how to make that happen. But again, developing just an emergency crisis bed doesn't fix the problem, because if a youth is stuck in an emergency bed for months and months, it ceases to be an opportunity or a solution for the other youth that are coming in afterwards. So we really need a place to step them down to. And the sister departments are all in conversation together on what we can build that would satisfy that need.
So I just want to make clear that my concern is that the kids get the right treatment and that they get treatment from people that are trained to deal with that population. And if it was health, for example, I spent a week, a year and a half ago, Thanksgiving week at Albany Med Center, but I was on the heart patient floor. There were nothing but heart patients on that floor. The teams were all geared to deal with heart problems. If I was on the lung patient floor, I would expect the team to be able to deal with lung cancer or lung problems, but I wasn't. And, I think my analogy is that we're asking your workers and your administration to work with people they're not trained to work with, and that doesn't often get good results. And we're doing the same thing in corrections. I just don't want to see us going down this road. I'm glad that you're working with them, but it bothers me that it's a problem for your workers, and it's a problem for the group homes that end up taking these kids. I can tell you it's a problem on Depot Street.
It's a problem for the kids and their families too.
And a problem for the kids. Well, that's what I was saying about the heart. If you're on the heart floor, you expect to get treated by heart people.
Absolutely. No, it
Not
makes a
one.
huge difference. When I was a teenager, I was put on the wrong floor because there was no room on the floor that I was supposed to be
Yeah.
in, and spent a week in the hospital, and it was really challenging.
Yeah. So, anyhow, we hope you'll be able to report at least on some success there.
I just want to add, there was
We're all
one.
part of the same agency, by the way. It's not like corrections, DMH, Dale, DCF, I almost said SRS. DCF are not all part of the same agency. I think it's time for the agency to take a good hard look at various populations and how we're managing that problem. Also the courts.
I don't
Anyway,
think they are part of VHS.
no, they're not part of AHS, but somebody is sending the kids to the wrong
Yeah.
place. Or maybe the right place doesn't exist. So establishing a crisis stabilization program, I'm talking mental health here. I should have been more clear, but I think I sneezed when I typed it.
You just accidentally deleted it?
Yeah, I probably accidentally deleted the mental health. It doesn't necessarily need to be residential, but it could be, but it also could be getting those kids when they're in crisis, the help they need right away. That was the complaint from your staff.
Right. And I do think, Senator, that's again pulling in one of our sister departments and working with them. Tyler or Erica, do you have anything to add with respect to mental health crisis stabilization?
I do appreciate the distinction. I remember having the conversation where mental health was one of the areas of focus here. So that was my suggestion. I do want to acknowledge that I do know that recently the crisis response, the DMH has released their mobile crisis response. So I think that might be part of what they would want to update about. I'm certainly not qualified to speak to the impact of that or how that looks yet, but I imagine that fits into this area of updating and reporting. And I do want to also just point, I think I missed 2 points on earlier as we were going through. I just wanted to say really quickly, on the last one, I wanted to the committee to consider where it says promoting opportunities in number 4 for services for children with developmental disabilities. I had a little bit of a not red flag, but I thought promoting opportunities seems to indicate that there's options out there, and this is really about folks not being aware that there's options available. And I think, again, this is more of, we're in that expanding capacity area where the DAs maybe don't have the capacity to provide the services. So I just wanted to note that for consideration. And then on item 3, I had walked, we walked out of that one before I had a point to make sure that I was saying, when I was saying expand the barge services, I wasn't referring to just expanding to include 19-year-olds in barge. I think that would be a portion of this, but it was expanding all non-custody DCF cases into that caseload. So it's a significant increase in work, and the barge network could not support that without this significant bump up in funding. Sorry to take us back.
No. Number 5.
I think we just did 5.
Yeah, we did.
Number 6 is enhancing long-term treatment for children.
Yeah, that goes along with your secure residential, secure, as well as non-secure long-term treatment. I'm particularly concerned about kids there, and this may be, I don't even want to mention the word Newberry, but I will. Looking at it as, an opportunity to have, obviously not the secure residential facility, perhaps something step down that could give long-term treatment to some of the kids that need it.
I think we're thinking along those same lines for a place like Newberry, having different programs that are a step down from the secure facility and the crisis stabilization facilities.
Senator?
Yeah, absolutely. So my understanding, and again, this group of people we're talking about is the population I work with, and I certainly know I've had more than one family struggle with long-term residential being placed out of state, and the impacts that has on the ability to maintain family structures and actually to ever have that child successfully step back home because they can't easily do home visits, they can't do supported. So I think it is really critically important that we look at this. I do, however, worry about the conversation around expansion of an institution rather than community-based home-like, because we know that is more successful. So yes, it's a problem and we have to deal with it. I just want to be really thoughtful about how we're dealing with it in a way that is evidence-based and driven by the data.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Tyler or Erica, anything you want to weigh in on there?
I would just like to appreciate the senator's last. Oh, Erica, I see you're speaking. I'm sorry. Would you like me to go first? Okay. I want to appreciate the senator's last comment. I fully agree with that. I think there's been so much emphasis on the development of secure placement specifically, and I don't want that to be expensive the importance of community-based placement. I think my misunderstanding of also the earlier point about when I was referring to community-based placements, I was talking about residential bed in the community. I think of home-based services, and when I think of community-based services, maybe it's just how we've organized it. I think of those residential facilities that are still in the community. They still have aspects where youth are integrated into communities. There is still family engagement within them. But even though they're in a residential setting, it's a different kind of makeup than a higher level program, which is about crisis stabilization, where youth might be, more tightly held into the space they're in, or something like a secure facility where they're securely held. It is a more of an integrated approach. So I think each one of these are layers, and I think expanding community-based services from the perspective of we're talking about home-based or we're talking about foster care where they're living in a home-like environment is always where our emphasis is, and we're trying to expand that at the same time. It just hasn't landed on these pages. So I want to appreciate the senator's last comment on that. That's very much aligned with DCF's values.
Thank you, Tyler. I was going to say, yeah, we are definitely sort of looking at it as a dual track, and really our values are in terms of making sure whenever possible you can come back home or stay at home. And we've definitely made an investment in Vermont support and stabilization services so that we can have those nice wrap services when kids are maybe in foster care or at home and they need that additional level of help in order to make sure that they can continue to be at home And that's also in line with Families Come First, where we're working to not even to get kids before they even get into the front door of our system to really provide those supports and services so they can stay at home, because you're absolutely right. Our better outcomes are when we can have kiddos at home. So I think that there's been so much emphasis because of the high-end system of care and the closure of Woodside and the pressure that's put sort of on top of the system, that gets a lot of the focus. But we've been really making a concerted effort still to try to grow out our other lanes of support, including foster care and really.
So,
No, I just say.
did we
Erica
freeze?
froze.
No? Okay. So is the wording okay with that? Or did you have suggestions for change?
I had no suggestions. Thank you, Senator.
So finally, it's number 7 on my list, and then we can talk about your list. Which is programming to help children, particularly 18 and 19-year-olds, transition from youth to adulthood.
I'll just defer immediately here to Erica and to Tyler on anything you'd like to add about that section.
I think
now
that's.
The 50-year-old moved back home. I'm not sure.
I know that in terms of that special, cohort of youth, we've been doing a lot of work with transitioning our contract at Return House to help with that particular age youth. And I know there's some other things that we would want to do to support that transition, because you hear so many stories about kiddos aging out of foster care and then going to a shelter, or so it is important to do that. Tyler, were there any additional programs that you think we should be mentioning today?
So there could be a lot we talk about with regard to this one at its highest level. If we're talking about residential programming, we are working with Elevate Youth Services on what Return House could look like. Return House, as the committee might be aware, was previously entirely a DOC facility, and it was working with a younger DOC population. And over the past couple of years, they've transitioned into a shared facility where we're able to get some youth into there. There's still some DOC individuals in there for an older youth population. And we're going to be moving entirely to make that a youth program. It's entirely for a transition age population. But the majority of 18 and 19-year-olds that we're going to be supervising, we're not going to be supervising from a custody perspective. We're supervising them from a delinquency perspective. Or a youthful offender perspective. And so that is available to us, but that's not where the emphasis should be. Again, a lot of these individuals can live at home with mom and dad, which is increasingly a common experience. I think we're probably pushing past 25 up to 30 in terms of youth living at home, but they might live at home. They might have their own apartment. They might have independent living. And there are other options that DCF has the ability to work with in there. We have individuals who work with our youth development program that has very strong results. We have our Compass program, which can work with older youth up to the age of 23 as well. So certainly maintaining those programs and maximizing the use of them, I think, is really important. Seeing where we can draw down additional federal dollars for extended foster care would be a wonderful option, although there's some asks of the judiciary in order to make that happen. So I think all those things can be updated on and need to be progressing as well.
That's fine. I mean, back originally when we started the Raise the Age conversation, Vincent Giraldi came in here and presented us with this entire scenario of what it was like following World War II, when the baby boomers and all that, and they were getting married at 18 and even younger, blah, blah, blah. Now, the 25-year-olds living at home. And so times have changed dramatically from what we recognize as youth to adulthood. But his point was, many of these kids don't have that opportunity that other kids have to move back home or to move whatever they can. So that it's important that we help them transition into adulthood. Whether, you know, and I put particularly 18 and 19-year-olds because I see that as a group that by and large will have the quickest, but I'm fine with whatever. Senator Bowles?
Yeah, my question, so, and I don't even know if it's still functioning, but once upon a time, we had the Vermont Youth in Transition program that, in my recollection, explicitly was set out to do all of the things that we're talking about, making sure that youth ages, I think 16 to 21, are kept out of the correction system, have adequate mental health care, and so if that is still a functioning program, and I don't know if it is, I can't find the answer in my Google searching, are you partnering with them?
Appreciate that
Go ahead.
question. Actually, that is within my unit's purview. I don't have on the top of my head. I think there's remnants of it that are remaining in how we approach, but it's not, we don't have a contractual relationship in there. There are youth serving agencies all around the state. And like I said, our contractual relationship with them is either through the YDP programs or the Compass programs. So I can only speak to that now, but I could bring in my subject matter expert to speak to that if the committee has more questions.
Do you have any adds to the list other than you'd like to see it by every other month report, and you're okay with starting on passage?
That's correct, Senator. I'll just add a couple of things, you know, looking back to our Raise the Age report and the sort of the benchmarks that we had included in there. Most of them are covered in this list, but a couple of things that I would add, you know, and if Tyler or Erica were in the room, they might kick me, but I would say adding to this reporting, we should report on the status of the workforce in family services. So the things like the vacancy rates, turnover, time to hire. We're collecting all of that data now. We're paying a lot more attention to workforce recruitment and retention. We think things are moving in the right direction based on the data that we have, but I think it would be helpful to you to know, like, what are our vacancy rates? What kind of stress is still out there on the workforce before we implement?
Reported by district too?
That could be reported by district, absolutely.
That would be helpful to know if there's districts that need shoring up.
That's right.
Senator Bowski?
Yeah, I think that is important. I think it's also going to be important to know what the turnover is and what's being done to create a culture in which people want to work.
That's right.
And what retention tools are being utilized in that reporting requirement.
We are doing a lot of work in focusing on that, and we'd be happy to report on the progress.
Thank you. No, that was going to be one of my questions was, you know, is there a way to capture workload capacity or, you know, workforce development in all of this? And I know with capacity, I don't think I've ever seen an agency where, you know, where folks are saying, yes, everything is totally fine. Work, you know, capacity is great. We have funding for everything we need, but you know, to the point that you raised, I agree with it, and I would echo Senator Mahosky's support as well.
One of the things that came through loud and clear Friday is those three workers are dedicated to this population, but they're frustrated with some of the turnover because services that are outlined here are not available to them, and they're forced to deal with some of these kids.
Yeah, I'm really glad you took testimony from them and could hear from
that
the
burns out. I mean, they're talking about burning out of staff, and we don't much do.
Well, the other thing I heard from that group, and I've heard from others in the community, is sort of an inadequacy of training for what they're being faced with. So I also really would like to be updated on what movement is being made in adequate training.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna just to say absolutely, and the tie between the deficiencies in the system of care and how that impacts the workers, and then the turnover really is something that we should add into the report. And we do have a newly hired workforce development director that's already been digging in and getting data on that information. So we'd be happy to provide that and make sure it's broken down by district because you're correct, Senator. Sometimes it's sort of an up and down. Some districts are doing really well and others are struggling. And then we need to shore up those districts with additional supports and workers. And then it sort of goes back and forth, sort of a game of whack-a-mole. But having a new position dedicated to really trying to find ways to provide better work-life balance I'm really hoping that'll help sort of smooth out our hiring challenges.
Were there other benchmarks?
Yeah, the last one that I would add, and I don't know if Erica or Tyler have anything else to contribute after this, but I would say an update on the ongoing project to install the comprehensive child welfare information system, so CWIS, how we're doing with that. I think it's an
How
important
old
piece.
is your system?
It's a very old system, and this one's going to take quite a bit to replace.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just a question on the CWIS. Am I right that what the department is talking about for the coming year is carry forward money for that?
That's correct.
4 million or so?
And there's a 50% federal match to that. So we have about 9 million to work with to get started.
Okay, and then just understanding that you haven't developed a budget for the entire life of that, what could you tell us about your thinking about how that might be funded as we go out a couple of years?
That's a great question. Erica, do you have any thoughts on, modular installation of it versus long-term and what the future might look like? We still, Senator, don't have a full picture, having not gone out to RFP yet, of what the full cost might be. We know anecdotally from other states.
Absolutely. Although we would prefer to have, implement the entire system, it's about 9 modules, I believe. But given the funding, and we'll be continuing to look for sources of funding, even carry forward, we may need to implement it module by module. And what we've done in drafting the RFP, which is at the PAT review right now, we're really anticipating being able to issue it very soon, is we drafted it by our workforce and our workflows. So certain workflows go across modules. So we might need perhaps 3 modules to do sort of our case management work. So that's how we're pricing it out in order for it to be useful for the way our workers accomplish their tasks. But I agree that it's really necessary to do a lot of the work and a lot of the data tracking that this type of work requires, in addition to making sure we have information tracking, race, ethnicity, and all the other things that we really want to make sure we have a good hold on in terms of making sure there's no disparate impact, as well as bringing in additional 4E dollars. So the system is critical for continuing to move forward with this kind of initiative. Although given the amount of time to implement it, we're not saying we don't want to continue. We just want to make sure we have a funding commitment.
Just have one more follow-up on that.
Well, if I could just ask the name of the system for Eric.
Child Welfare Information System.
Child Welfare Information.
Comprehensive, so there's 2 C's.
Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. Senator Ruth has a question about the comprehensive child
Yes.
welfare.
So that was very informative. So is it fair to say that the thinking is it would be modular, but it wouldn't be 1 module at a time? It might be 3 in the first go around following the carry forward?
I think that's a fair characterization. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And
Senator Hashim and then vote. Senator Bowles.
sorry if you already mentioned this, but how many years would it take to fully implement the new change if we're going forward in a modular method?
I think that's still unknown, and it'll depend on the responses we get, the vendor proposals, the amount of funding that we have available. So very much unknown.
We'll get updated on that. Right? Senator Bowles.
Yeah, my question is around vacancy savings. And I know you have 24/7 programs that likely don't see a lot of vacancy savings because you're paying overtime, but I'm wondering if given that we went over the statewide vacancy report, and there's a pretty strong you're at the top of the list for vacancies. And so I'm wondering if there are vacancy savings, and if they are being prioritized for these initiatives.
Erica,
We
would you
do
like to-
have some vacancy savings, but a lot of the money has been used for overtime to sort of take into account the staffing and the things that we've done because of those vacancies. I would need to look back and come back with some specific numbers about exactly how much vacancy savings we have and where it's gone and what may be remaining. But we have a significant financial pressure because of overtime.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? So what I'm hoping to be able to do, and I appreciate this, all of you, I appreciate the cooperation. I think the committee does as well in breaking a logjam.
I do have a question.
Okay,
I wasn't sure if you were wrapping up.
I'm trying to wrap up.
Okay, if I could,
I've got Mr. Schilling.
understood. I thank you for I heard you say that the administration wants to implement raise the age, and I thank you for that. I also heard you saying that you were hesitant to commit to the funding for these items. And so my question boils down to, so this would be the third delay we would be doing on the 19-year-olds. I'm just wondering if we establish these 9 benchmarks, let's say, and they're reported on every 2 months or so, but the administration isn't putting forward funding requests, if we couldn't wind up in the same position January, February next year, where we can say that there has been substantial progress on 3 of 9, but you might come in and say, clearly, since we're only at 3 of 9, we need another year. Can you assure me that that's not going to happen? Or is that just part and parcel of the unforeseeable future for you and the department?
Thank you, Senator. I think, if you look back at the 5 factors that we laid out in our Raise the Age report, we have said that I think at least 4 of those need to be in place. The 5th, the CWIS piece, could be partially underway, and we'd be comfortable with that. So first and foremost, do we have the appropriate secure residential facilities? Second, do we have the staffing to do this and not the current existing strained staff that we have? And then looking at these 7 to 9 factors, I think we could meet a number of these in our reporting over the next several months and still come to you and say we don't have the facility, or we don't have the workforce, or we have not found the funding source to be able to expand the barge contract. Or I think any of those are a possibility in the coming year, that we could potentially be here a year from now saying some of these are met, some of these are not. We would still want to delay raising the age until those things were in place.
Understood. And that's pretty much, thank you. That's pretty much what I expected. I actually think this list it's a very sensible list, but we go from a place where we are now, which is the law calls for it to be implemented, to establishing a list that we're keeping track of with the implicit understanding that we're not going to do it until this list is met. And what I worry is that that sets up a very, sort of cut and dried argument next year that we don't have 3 of these 9, or we don't have 4 of these 9. Therefore, by the committee's own expressed logic, we should delay it another year. And I'm willing to vote for a third delay, but if it's really the administration's position not to commit to funding these, then it seems like the administration is then committing to not funding what's in statute, and I can't get away from that. So
I think that my intent here is that the Raise the Age initiative takes effect on April 1st, 2025, whether they've met them or not. That's it. open discussion for the next session of the legislature, obviously. But that next section of the legislature would have to give further extension if they saw fit. And if it's not written that way, I want to make sure that it is, because it's my intent that raise the age take effect on April 1st.
Yes, but that's what we did last year. We
I know.
put a new
But-
date in, and I'm worried that what we're doing here actually increases the likelihood that we won't do it in April, because we will have established 9 benchmarks that have to be met, which aren't currently in statute, but that we will be putting there.
That's really up to, the key place here is the Justice Oversight Committee to try to keep the feet to the fire. And I chair the Justice Oversight Committee.
Yeah,
I have every faith in your holding people's feet to the fire. I do have concerns with the administration's unwillingness to commit to funding these initiatives. And I would actually like to see a benchmark added about that, a report on what funding is going into this, so we can actually hold their feet to putting their money where their mouth is. It's one thing to come in here and say we support the policy, but if the budget and how we fund things is an expression of our values. It is ultimately the document that says we care about this or we don't.
Right.
And so if we're not funding it, it's just words.
I think what I'd like to see that, that's a good suggestion. I'd like to give Eric and the administration an opportunity to wordsmith that. I'm not sure they could report on it until every other month they could report, but I don't think DCF submits it, but the commissioner submits a budget to the secretary of the agency of human services, who then submits something to the governor's office, who then decides what to put in. If anyone in that chain decides not to have it in the governor's 2026 budget, then that's what we'd be looking for. But obviously, there wouldn't be much to report on in June or July. So, I don't know. But it would be important to know, at least at the point where you can be open about what you're suggesting.
Right.
I'm still taken back by the discussion yesterday in appropriations about the 29 million in one-time funds.
Mhm.
How they're gonna deal with that in FY26. Has nothing to do with DCF. And it had to do with ongoing expenses that are being covered by 29 million in one time. It took 9 million out of childcare.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate, and I'm happy to let Eric and the administration work on wordsmithing that. I don't want to create a report for reporting's sake to only be sitting here again in the future saying, well, we didn't do any of that.
So unless there's any other comments from the commissioner or the committee, I would like to have Eric and work with me, and if we can come back to this on Friday, we have scheduled time on Friday for raise the age discussion and maybe finalize this. I know Senator Baruch won't be here, unfortunately, but you can try to finalize where we're at. And Eric will share with your team whatever you need for information. Is that acceptable?
Thank you. Really appreciate the committee.
And I will say, I know you don't want more reports, but it seems like this is one you kind of asked for.
I think this is a great one.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to say personally to Commissioner Winters that I understand you're in an extremely tough place here and also on the GA program. And my questions in both cases are, I think, directed at policies that are coming to you, not originating with you. And I understand you to be a dedicated public servant. I just want you to know that in making my critique, it is never a critique of you. It is potentially a critique of the administration, but just to know that I appreciate your work.
So, thank you, Senator. I really appreciate that. And there will be times when a critique of me will be appropriate, and I hope you don't hold back that.
I want to thank I want to again thank Tyler and the deputy, and as well as the staff that's here this morning. Been very helpful conversation. I think at least I feel like we're getting somewhere to compromise on this issue. And I do want to thank Steve Howard for arranging for the staff members on last Friday. It was very helpful. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alphonse Schilling, and I hope he can be brief. If he needs more time, we can give him more time at a later time.
Yeah, I will do my best. And I know that this is up again on Friday, so plan to join the committee for that discussion as well, so.
Okay.
Senators, may I just get Senator Norris's vote on the record?
Oh, Senator Norris, how do you vote on
S 163.
the judges?
Yes. Thank you.
Taxes.
We
Not very
called-
fiscally conservative.
called you a tax and spend liberal.
Two of them are already in the budget, you said, so.
One of them already exists and is gonna
And
save
the
us
third
money.
one is
Third one
already
we did
paid for
tobacco
on
funds, so.
fund.
And it's saving us money.
I try to pay attention.
Sometimes we're just a country.
All right, well, good morning. My name is Walter Schilling. I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Vermont. I think this is the first time I've had the opportunity to testify to this committee this session. I know some of my colleagues have been here as well. And I want to speak today about some of our concerns relating to S58. The most recent draft I've been looking at is draft 3.2. I know things have been moving pretty quickly on this. Been watching it, but as the deliberations have moved forward, there's been a couple of areas of concern that we want to point to, and I'll do my best to be pretty quick.
Okay, I'll only say that, in my estimation, this is not moving quick.
Well, maybe it's not moving quickly out of the committee, but there's been a number of changes made to the bill.
Correct.
A number of different iterations that we've been doing our best to keep abreast of as it's moved forward. So I'll move through the sections pretty quickly within the next 10 minutes, but as I said, I know this is up for more discussion on Friday, and I'd like to be here for that as well. So starting on page 2 in section 1, we have concerns about the change of the knowingly standard. So this would be within the definitions section of the chapter that relates to all regulated drugs, selling, possessing, dispensing, and as this could be a pretty significant change to existing case law and could have unintended consequences that go beyond some of the circumstances that you've heard about and then some of the situations that folks are trying to address. It lowers the knowing standard to one that is not actually knowing, but has conscious disregard. So that knowing standard in there is in fact 2 different standards at once. And if you look through the statute, it often says knowingly, so changing that throughout. So I think if that's something where the committee wanted to change that to more of a reckless type standard, it might make sense to actually spell that out through the statute in the instances where that was appropriate. This would apply to pretty much every knowingly possessing, knowingly selling, knowingly distributing throughout the chapter. So this is a pretty big change that lowers the knowledge requirement of someone to be convicted of these crimes. And anytime we're looking at increasing criminal liability, especially on a wide range of potential drug crimes, that's something that's of concern to us. This is also a concern due to the fact that when the Council of State Governments looked at the racial disparities that exist within our current criminal legal system, they found that felony drug crimes were one of the areas where we had the most significant differences. A Black defendant was 18 percentage points more likely to be convicted to incarceration, though the same likelihood of being convicted for the crime overall. So this could have the unintended consequence of increasing some of the racial disparities that exist within our system, and also be pretty far-reaching and expansive in terms of who is liable and for what crimes by lowering that knowledge standard throughout the entire chapter. So that's one thing I want to point to as a concern.
No worry. Quick question. It just occurred to me that consciously disregarding, is that essential, without saying it in the language, is that essentially bringing it down to a recklessness standard?
I think it's similar to recklessness. I don't know the exact case law, but it would definitely be lowering it from a knowing standard, including a lower standard. I think we can ask with counsel about that for more clarification.
Thank you.
Yes, and, yes, Michelle.
Sure, just if it's helpful, I can read to you from the jury instructions, for here in Vermont with regard to the reckless standard. What they have is that you may find the defendant acted recklessly, if the defendant acted without regard to the possible consequences of their actions.
That's for recklessness. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So as a whole, this is an area where we have concerns since it's lowering the knowledge requirements and create greater criminal liability for all possession, distribution, and sale crimes. So moving forward, looking at page 4 or page 3, so this would be section 4. This is the creation of a new crime of dispensing xylazine, just generally as a concern to us when we're creating new crimes, especially when we're now going to have a lower knowledge requirement, and we're hearing that this is something that can be an adulterant in many different substances people might not actually know, and could potentially mean that we're piling on more potential charges for something that someone might not have actually known was within that mixture. So just as a general concern, the creation of any new drug crime is something that we're not supportive of. Moving forward more quickly, so section 3, I appreciate that the committee, when looking at this section, had concerns about the use of mandatory minimums. We share those concerns and do not support mandatory minimums in general. So I appreciate what the committee has done to try and, in section C, to try and give a way for a judge to modify a sentence outside the constraints of the mandatory minimum that currently exists. So that's something that we're appreciative of. Another way to get at that would just be to remove the mandatory minimum in section A. But outside of that, we're concerned about eliminating the defense that someone did not know, or that a substance did not contain one or more drug, as well as permissive inference that drug was the approximate cause of someone's death. I think the permissive inference can be concerning, since we've heard that there is fentanyl and other adulterants in many, many drugs, but it's very hard to determine what quantities those exist in. And so if we're not making the prosecution prove and allowing them to have the permissive inference that was the proximate cause of death, if it contains fentanyl at all, this could be a situation where we have a very minor amount of an adulterant that might not have actually been the cause of death. And that's just concerning, and I've heard some concerns from the Defender General's office about how this might be applied. But also just generally removing the defense that it contained a second drug that they were unaware of is something that's of concern when we are eliminating the ability for defendants to make those defenses on the stand, especially in a crime that carries such a significant sentence. And then in this section, I know we talked a little bit more around the idea of distribution with death resulting, and the good work this committee has done in passing Good Samaritan laws. And I think that's something that, if here or somewhere else, we would love to see more effort putting behind trying to publicize those laws, their applicability, and the lives that they can save, because we think the committee did really good work passing those laws. And by making folks more aware that those laws exist, that they have that ability to be relieved of this criminal liability, I think makes it more likely that we'll see people call for help and try and help people when they've experienced drug overdoses, which I think is the shared goal of everyone who's been working on this piece of legislation, is trying to make it more likely that we can save more lives. And then within the next 3 minutes, I'll just sum up quite quickly. Sections 4 through 9, we have concerns about expediting the process of eviction for folks who are alleged to have engaged in illegal drug activity. One of the things we heard in testimony was that a number of these folks were not actually the ones engaged in the distribution, the selling, or anything like that, but might in fact be victims themselves. And so the idea that we are then accelerating the process for eviction for people who might, who are the tenants who then might themselves become homeless is of a concern. And then finally, section 10, the ACLU does not support adding more crimes to the Big 12 where youth would be brought into criminal court as opposed to seen in the family division. So I did my best to wrap that up in about 10 minutes that I had. But high level concerns on a number of those sections. And I guess at that point, we'll happy to take any questions with 2 minutes left.
The place where I want to go back to is the knowing standard.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that the current standard is very difficult to, so narrow. And we're trying to change it. I spoke to Michelle about narrowing the scope of the knowing. It doesn't make sense when you say it openly. Narrowing the sense of knowing, so it doesn't be so broad. What we're trying to get at is the person who, if 100% of the glassine bags that the Department of Public Safety tests contain fentanyl, you can be pretty sure fentanyl's involved in that drug, whichever it was that the state police confiscated. If 50% of the bags have some xylazine, you can be pretty sure there's some xylazine in some of them, particularly when you see EMT try to help somebody recover from an overdose of Narcan, and the Narcan doesn't work. You pretty much know that. Anyway, so we're trying to get at that. That's what we're trying to get at. And, maybe we took a sledgehammer when a hammer would have been enough. So we can look Friday at some ways of narrowing.
I think if you have,
I know it won't satisfy
it may be your position that no change, right? And that's fair for you to do, but it is applied throughout chapter 84, as you noted. So possession, dispensing, sale for all crimes, and then as well as things like death with death resulting. And I think, Senator Shears is kind of wondering whether or not you could foresee some way to address his concern around, that would meet your concerns around being able to go to the intent of the original statute. So like if you think about one of the cases, I think it was Judge Treadwell's case a couple of years ago, where it was like you could not prove necessarily what the person, that the person knew what it was that they were selling, but they knew that they were selling something because they were marketing that for purposes of sale. And so, but I think he's not necessarily interested in taking a blunt instrument to it in areas where it doesn't need to be, but to get at specifically that particular conduct.
Senator Sheem has the final question, and we're going to adjourn.
Thank you. And so, my main thoughts with this are on section 3, but that's a lot to unpack. So just real quick, I'll actually ask you about the definition for knowingly again. With the way it's written now, if somebody is in possession of one glassine bag of heroin and they are charged, would they be charged with possession of heroin and possession of fentanyl at the same time? Do you see that as a possibility?
I think it's a possibility, but because they would be in possession, if they're ignoring a substantial risk, to be in possession of both heroin and an undefined amount of fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And I believe I don't think there's possession limits in terms of what triggers. Fentanyl, I think, is actually a distribution crime, so it might not be possession there, but say you had another different mixture of drugs with possession crimes, I think there's a possibility you could see folks charged with multiple crimes if they did not know those adult drugs were in there and there was a possession crime attached.
Okay, thank you.
Or charged